My wife and I own Decatur County Feed Yard since 1977 on Highway 83, which is south of North Platte, south of McCook, Nebraska, just barely into the state of Kansas. 40,000 head yard. We built it from 18,000 on up to 40,000. And retained ownership was the name of our game, and that's what I want to share with you today. And Brett Stewart and I had a talk about this just a little bit ago. I am an unapologist for the fact that that is what we do. And to me, and I hope I make this clear and plain in my presentation, is that until you decide you're going to retain ownership of your calves through possibly your own feeding operation, you just don't learn as much about those cattle as you need to know to make genetic and management changes going into the future with those. So I hope that's what I bring across to you today as best I can. And my presentation probably is about 45 or possibly 50 minutes long. But I'll stop at least once or twice throughout and see if I struck a chord with you, see if you think I'm completely stupid or whatever you're thinking, give you the chance to respond to that or ask questions, say I don't understand anything you're talking about, would you start over again? And I do realize that the feeding business has been my life, my whole life, and there might be some terminology that I talk about that may not quite sound right to you. It's not just my Kansas accent, and it's I'm misspeaking or something. Okay, so as has been said, we're going to get to some individual animal closeouts before I'm done today. And if you're in the back, you will not be able to see the numbers. I'll describe the numbers to you or what the headings are so you can understand that. Those in the front here can see it. It's not completely crystal clear for you either, unfortunately, but I think you'll be able to see it. So this is what Decatur County Feed Yard looks like today. The road you see in the front there is U.S. Highway 83. It's basically 3/4 of land with lots of feeding pens in them. This is a little bit of my own history, and the road hasn't been quite that straight. Okay, you'd like it to be, but life is full of challenges, and we faced our share of those. But we came to this feed yard in 1977, and I grew up feeding cattle with my father in central Kansas. And the question was, maybe not so much to you folks here in this state because of your history of cattle feeding or the corn that you have available to you in the markets and so on and so forth. But to me in northwest Kansas, I realized early on there were 250 commercial feedlots in Texas, 150 in Kansas, and roughly 250 in Nebraska, and X number in Iowa. And the question is, why would anybody in this room, for example, or anywhere else, why would you ever feed cattle with us? And everybody's feeding cattle, everybody has the cheapest corn, everybody has the best management, everybody has the most packers, and all that's somewhat not true, but everybody was saying it. So I raised my hand and said, we're going to work with ranchers. We want to work with ranchers because I want to work with good cattle, and I want to be able to maybe make a difference in their lives. Certainly they can make a difference in mine. So early on we made this decision to work directly with ranchers on retained ownership of cattle. Believe it or not, that's me basically on my first day of the job. You recognize me? Hair color different, body shape different, everything different. That is my father-in-law. He made this possible to me. He bought this feedlot and asked me to come out and run it all at the same time. Neither one of us had ever been there before, basically. But bought it in 1977. And the question you or anybody else, of course, would have been asking is, how are you going to price my cattle? How do you price cattle besides just say, I want this for my cattle? What are they worth? How do you value the cattle? How many people in this room feed cattle in one form or another, like fed cattle, sell fat cattle? Do you all sell them on a beef price? Is that the way cattle are sold here? Pretty much 100%, is that right? What are you going to get for my cattle? That was the original manager of the feed yard. They're out here discussing this Hereford critter. No doubt should have topped the market, right? And no doubt did top the market. But the questions are, they should top the market. I want to know what that is. All of them top the market. There is no differentiation. Have no clue what they're worth. And ranchers learn nothing. If you retain ownership of your cattle, or and don't try to learn something about what makes those cattle valuable. What is the worth of these cattle? You don't learn anything. If you sell your cattle in October, the way a lot of people do, that's it. They weighed this much, they brought this much, and I hope it was good because I sold them all in one day. This picture actually is a little bit of a stretch because there's about as difference in cattle there as you can get. There's no Mexicans in there, I don't think. But back then, let's say, before the 90s, there really was no market differentiation of what cattle were worth. Yield came into the picture, and so on and so forth, but there was no real market differentiation. This guy worked for K-State in Extension. John Brethauer is his name. If you go back and look at a lot of ultrasound records from anywhere, Iowa State, whatever, John's name will be in there a lot. And so through him, through K-State, through Patsy Houghton, we started ultrasounding cattle. We added scales under our chutes in 1986, and we started ultrasounding in 1987 with K-State. And so therefore we started these futurity things, and I think Iowa's had futurities for a long, long time, and it gives people a chance to retain ownership and to try to figure out how their cattle perform, what their health program truly is, how they respond to that, how they respond to joining other cattle in foreign pens, for example. I mean, literally a different place. And so we did that for 3 years. And by the way, I'm not trying to, I sold my feedlot, okay? So I'm not here soliciting business today. I have no axe to grind with anyone. I just want you to try to understand what individual cattle management is like, and that it might plant a seed in your heads of what you can do at your place with electronic ear tags or with other of your neighbors or whatever to try to make more and understand more, learn more, and make a better future for yourselves by retaining ownership of cattle. So the first thing we had was a high plains steer futurity. We followed that on the same time frame with the 4-H kid steer futurity. CAB liked that idea, so we did a certified Angus beef value discovery project there for 5 years. The National Cattlemen's Association saw that what we were doing along those lines and asked us to host the Strategic Alliance's pilot project, and I don't have any slides I do have the rest of the slide here to show, and there's another one over here if you guys can't see it over here, but 15 ranchers from the north, central, northwest United States retained ownership of their cattle with us, with Cargill, and with XL, and with Safeway. So these cattle were owned by 4 different entities with skin in the game. So all of us had something to win or lose, gain or lose through this program. And it was a demonstration of what cooperation could be in the beef system and how to possibly make it more streamlined and more profitable for everyone involved. And getting data back, getting feedback back to your ranch was one of the key drivers as far as you would be concerned. I want as much money as I can get. I want all my cattle are worth. If your cattle aren't worth very much, I guess someday along the way you'd want to know that. If they're worth a lot, I think you ought to probably know that because you could make more money that way. So back then, this is 1992. There was $300 difference. You brought me 1 load of cattle, okay, as a rancher, and in your cattle in that day, that week, there was $300 difference between 2 animals in that pen, the best and the worst. And that was an eye-opener that should get anybody's attention. Today, that is probably easily $1,000, okay, between and these cattle were 1 load of cattle out of maybe 1,500. The ranchers who brought us these cattle brought us their best. You can bet on that. They wanted to be the best. And someone was the best and someone was the worst out of those 15 loads of cattle, but everybody brought us their good ones. So after 15 years of traditional feeding, getting average data and pen closeout averages, we bought into a system called AccuTrack by Microbeef, and in putting all this stuff together, it's truly value-based marketing. If any of you cattle feeders in this room would think back about how you were selling cattle in the early 90s, it might have been in the beef. I wouldn't say it wasn't. It easily could have been. But it wasn't necessarily value-based marketing because of how the individual cattle varied inside the herd that you were feeding. So in '94, we installed a Microbeef AccuTrack system called Individual Cattle Management, where precision cattle management was data-driven, results-oriented, enhanced productivity to improve profitability, and then to evaluate all of that information back to you as a cattle owner. And this is a management tool that you've seen many, many times over, but it's true. You cannot manage what you do not measure. If you're not measuring what you're doing, how are you going to make the changes necessary to make it better? What are they? How would you know what changes you need to make if you have nothing to compare it against? So again, you're not going to feed cattle with me because I'm out of the business. But the point is, if you did, you would have a chance to bring me 1 load of cattle, 2 loads of cattle, 3 loads of cattle that become part of 40,000 head of cattle, and you're going to have an individual 1 animal closeout plus a group of animal closeouts, plus that'll be compared to our feedlot averages, all managed, marketed, fed the same way. So you really do have something to compare. You compare yourself to yourself to all people that are in this program with us doing things the same way at the same time for the same reasons. And Evan, I'm going to take the time to go through this a little bit right here. This is the AccuTrack system. And two feedlots installed this in 1994. And we were, of course, one of those. So this animal is he's in the system, going through the yard. And let's say you brought him in today at processing. They are processed. This guy's just getting ready for the journey. So you just hold him steady here. You get a frame score on this animal here. You get a scale weight on the animal here. If they're yearlings or fat cattle, we get an ultrasound fat reading here. And then the cattle, when we're processing them, of course, they get the implants, the ear tags, the electronic ear tag. If you have a ranch tag in these animals, they're cross-referenced at this point back to your ranch tag. So the ranch tag becomes, as far as we're concerned, electronic tag, or vice versa, back to you. Don't have to explain this to you guys in this room very much, but it's just ironic to me. You're in a unique position because a lot of you are farmers and farmer feeders. But farmers know all about precision agriculture, for crying out loud. You live it, you do it, you see what has happened to your farming operation over the last 10 or 15 years. Why is it so hard to believe we can't do the same thing with cattle? And of course, we started this 20 years ago. Oops. A lot of you in this room know all about the SHAPS program. It's a way to measure cattle in performance at the farm or ranch level. So you tend to benchmark production, but we only go so far with that data. When you sell the cattle as feeder cattle, you lose all of that data, the future of that data. So we've fed, of course, well over 1 million cattle since 1994 on this program. So you bring your cattle to our feedlot 1 load at a time. We cross-reference your production data with ours on day 1 as best we can, as best you give us. They are processed, identified individually, put in your pen of cattle. So that's how we start the deal. When it comes time to finish the cattle, we take them back through that same system, and I'll see it again after a bit, but they go back through that same system, and we ultrasound the cattle, we weigh the cattle, we frame score the cattle for slaughter. And I will show that. They all go to Cargill at Dodge City on Friday every week. Cargill at Dodge City Friday of every week, over and over and over. When the cattle tell us, according to their measurements, that they're ready for market. So we've taken as much guesswork out of handling these cattle, selling these cattle, as we possibly can, so that you can believe it day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year. Our data is as clean and pure as we can make it. It's not perfect, but it's as good as I know how to make it. So you bring your cattle to us. We measure, sort, manage the cattle, sell the cattle on a grid. They'll be sold on 5 different markets probably. That is how you did, called the benchmark. We and you analyze this data together, get a plan together to implement something, including a breeding program, and then you're in this spin wheel forever. Never get out of there, because you're trying to get better every year. And your neighbors may not be, but you are. A little bit off the top of the chart here, but this guy, some of you probably know him, but his name is Mike Healy. He's out of Worland, Wyoming. He is a guy like me, or like many of you, that left the farm. I left the farm for 7 years, went to work in the city. I was lucky enough to go back to do what I wanted to do. Mike did the same thing. He came back to the ranch in 1985, Worland, Wyoming. It's about as different from here as you can get. They get 9 inches of rain a year, whether they need it or not. It's high desert country. Near Cody, Wyoming, a lot of you have been there. That's very much where this place is. So he started feeding cattle with us in 1995. So he started making changes on his own and did okay at it for a while till he got a little bit too cute with the system, started saving his own bulls, making his own bulls in his own herd. Whatever results he was improving on, he flatlined for 3 or 4 years entirely. Then I'm gonna say he bought Leachman bulls. That doesn't mean I'm here necessarily absolutely telling you got to own Leachman bulls, but Leachman has been very good with us. His customers have done very well with us. So we started buying Leachman bulls in 2003. That's a long time before 2009. Okay, but I'm gonna take a point in time here, talk about his cattle that are raised in very, very tough conditions. So he takes these Angus black-hided cattle from his ranch near Worland and gets them started, takes them off the cow, weans them at a back rounding yard up there. And this year, when we fed the cattle out, and I'm going to get to these numbers here one line at a time, but the feed efficiency was 541 to 1, and the hot carcass weight was 816. You're going to see, look at these numbers, write them down, whatever. These are fantastic numbers already, okay? Upper choice CAB was 26%. The regular choice was 43% on top of that. Ribeye was basically par at 12.5. The dressing percent was basically par at 63. The daily gain was very good in our system, 367, and the yield grade was 2.8. Sold the cattle on June the 4th, on average. We sorted the cattle into probably 5 or 6 different groups and sold them 2 weeks apart for several weeks. 2013 came from the same place. Now we're under 5 on feed efficiency. This guy's going to be under 4 before you guys will know it, but he's under 5 right now. Hot carcass weight of 862, only added 50 pounds of weight to the cattle. Upper two-thirds choice, 48%. Regular choice, 30. Ribeye area has gained an inch. Dressing percent has gained a point. Average daily gain hasn't changed much, neither has the yield grade. But that is a tremendous improvement in profitability just by genetics in a very short period of time. When you go to the sale, when you go to Leachman's sale in Fort Collins, this guy will buy the highest priced bulls out there because you know what? He knows what they're worth, not what he thinks they're worth or what somebody else thought they were worth. He knows what they're worth. The cows are more fertile and have, can't even read that down there. So to recap that, he sold them. They arrived 23 days early at 4 pounds lighter. And all this stuff then goes to a commonality of grain price and feeder price and fed cattle price, so that we're looking at the change in productivity of the cattle, not the market. Cost $9 per head less to feed them using the same grain price. Added 11% quality grade, choice and higher. Added 3% yield grade 1 and 2s. 46% hot carcass weight. Feed savings of $9.21. Added value of $110. So they were worth, on the standard, same market, $118, and was it 4 or 5 years later. And that, I'll guarantee you, that trend has continued to this day. Harvested the cattle 18 days earlier. He sold them in May versus June. Does that matter? Does it matter when he sold them? Why does it matter? Well, the price is better. Always? Almost always. 86% of the time. Was it true this year? No. Those numbers were based on $4.75 corn. Does that sound high or low to you? That's what it was, okay? So the question is, this is the question. How good a cattle do you have? How do you know? Who are you comparing them against? How do you know? What kind of report card do you have? How much genetic progress have you made during the last 3 years? And then, of course, how do you know? What was it worth to you? So the upper left-hand picture is the barn that we do this work in. and there's 7 pens. If you kind of count them pinwheeling around that building, there's actually 7 pens to sort into, and there's actually, you can split those in thirds, so there's double that on how many pens you can actually sort into. Lower right-hand side is what the inside of the building looks like from the rear to the head of the building. So here's the point. When you fed with us, you can measure all kinds of things because it is the same program week in and week out, month in and month out, and so forth. We use the same marketing grid with Cargill. We try to get paid more for it every year, but we have a yearly grid with Cargill at Dodge City. Same packer, same packing house, same day of the week, year after year. So you can say, this is what I did last year, this is what I did this year. Weather could enter into the picture, of course, but I can't help that. We'll do the best we can with it. Precision cattle feeding, like precision farming. Another look again at that system. It's a little bit better look. The cattle come in, left-hand side. You get a frame score on the cattle in number 2. You get a weight on the cattle, number 3. You get an ultrasound, number 4. And we either are processing the cattle day 1 or sorting the cattle 3 weeks ahead of market time into those 5 different groups based upon the change that they've made, the rate of change, how they will fit the marketing grid based upon what we know about them. We know what they've done till today. How will they perform going forward? And we're making a guess at that based upon measurements. All of these chutes are operated semi-automatically. If you can see, there's 2 little readers there. There's 2 readers there. There's actually 2 readers there. And this guy lets the cattle go out. They're semi-automatically with those readers there to show where the cattle are in the system. Precision cattle management. So if you brought us 100 head of cattle, we fed them until they're ready according to our grid. Now we're going to sort them into 5 groups. We're going to tell the computer, sort them into 4 groups, 5 groups. You can make them equal groups. You can make them, are they ready? How will they fetch back the most money? On the grid, and this is a typical, of course, bell-shaped marketing grid, okay? So 10% of the cattle are ready in the first week. 20% the third week, 40% the fifth week. We ship cattle every 2 weeks. Your cattle every 2 weeks. Every second Friday we're shipping those cattle till they're all gone. So as we sold the 10 head of cattle in week 1, because of electronics, you were commingled. We might have shipped 1,200 cattle that day. You have 10 head out of 1,200 cattle. Because of electronics, we know which your cattle are. We know what they were worth per head on the rail. Each one has its own unique weight, of course, and its own unique value. Was he a CAB? Was it not? What was it? So that's how you're paid. We cut you a check for 10 head of cattle, send it back to you. You know which 10 head has your ranch tag on them, which 10 head went in your name. This is what they brought. 2 weeks later, the same thing. 2 weeks later, the same thing, and so forth. I'm going to stop right there and ask you, any of you, if you have any questions about this. Evan, have I totally confused you? Still on track? Does anyone have any questions about why we did what we did? Two at the same time. The young lady is prettier than you, and she can go ahead first.
Thank you. Question: did you see issues with the hierarchy in your switching personally?
Issues with what?
The hierarchy.
Hierarchy. No. You know. Do we see issues with the hierarchy? I'm going to say bullers, if you'll allow me to. Is that what you're saying? The aggressiveness in the pen. Give you a long answer. That for anybody in this room, sorting the feed per head would be an issue. How do you do that? How does it affect the aggressiveness in the pen? All these cattle in each pen, let's say we sorted 3 pens of cattle this afternoon. They're sorted this afternoon. They're commingled this afternoon. They smell the same. We just did it. They go to their pen. They are tired. We just sorted these cattle. They're tired. So tonight it doesn't matter. Tomorrow night they're still going to find out who's the boss. Okay, and that's it. And if you'll drive by the feedlot this afternoon, any pen you look at, you're going to have a little activity in the pen at sundown today. It's just the way it is. So, the rest of the story is, I knew you would ask that question at the NCA in 1994. So as I went to that meeting, 95, I looked at our buller pen activity. There were 165 bullers in the buller pen. There were 30,000 head of cattle in the yard. 15 of those were through this system. 10 times that many, if you do the math, were regular fed cattle. Can't explain that, but it didn't matter is what I'm trying to say. It's 10-1 in favor of this, but I can't fully explain that. So, no. That's the short answer. Another question right here.
So how does a farmer feeder who purchases all of his inventory utilize this system, which needs to be shared all the way back to the beginning, without putting himself at a disadvantage?
The question is, why would he use this? If he buys feeder cattle, why would he use this? Simpler and a longer answer. This was honestly designed for a guy named Paul Engler. You ever heard of him? Fed a few cattle in his day. And lots of Mexican cattle. So they were as diverse a population. This was designed for as diverse a population as you could get and try to make something out of nothing, okay? To be kind. We took the exact opposite approach with it to do what we do. If I tried hard not to buy anything out of a sale barn. Nothing against sale barn. I like to know what I'm doing. That's this whole basis, this whole deal. I would like to know when I buy cattle, what are they worth? I would like to know what they're worth. And without knowing the background of them, guys, it's going to come to this sooner or later. What are they worth? How are you going to sell them when there's lots of cattle on the market? Because is there any branded beef out here? Do you notice any branded beef besides Angus? There's branded beef everywhere. And where do you think you're going to source those cattle? They're going to source them where there's a source. So if you don't care, and you might not, if you just want to buy the cheapest cattle you can buy at a sale barn and so-called upgrade them and get away with it, that's what my dad did, okay? If you want to know and repeat what you're doing every year with certain Montana ranchers, then this has, to you, it has validity, okay? I'd like to know, cattle are easily worth, in today's market, probably 40 or 50 bucks a hundred difference, okay? Because of what I'm talking about here. Mike Healy will never sell his cattle because you're not going to afford to pay for them. You won't. So it's a matter of knowing what you've got and knowing how you got there because you designed it yourself. So it goes either which way, okay? To me. Ted?
You kind of touched on that, Warren. I remember the 93 $300 a head, and you said it's much more than that today. Do you have numbers?
No, easily $800. Easily $800 in anybody's cattle today. And then yours might be worth $800 more on top of that over his, because we're talking about real money today. And the odd thing about what I'm talking about, again, this speech basically is designed more for a cow-calf operator in Montana, for example, than the people in this room, because a lot of you are integrated. You're farmer feeders, okay? You raise the cattle, you feed them your corn and so forth. But the theory is still there. What are they worth? And why don't you make them worth $800 a head more? Try, at least from the worst ones, That's your goal, is knowing the hill you have to climb. And if you can't afford to do it today, I wonder, we've come a long ways in the last 2 or 3 years. I wonder when you're going to be able to afford this. At closeout, we ship cattle every 2 weeks. At closeout, you get a closeout on the cattle as a group, okay? Individually and as a group. And that's why we ask you to move forward here. So I'm not sure any of you can actually read this slide. Can you see it, sort of? This slide is, the upper half of this slide is a typical closeout with averages. Average in weight, average out weight, average feed efficiency, and so forth. The bottom half is on some of these profit drivers on a graphical situation. How did your cattle do on these averages on the profit drivers? And I have a hand up back here.
Are you doing any calculations of individual feed efficiency?
I'll try to show that. The answer is yes. Every animal has, when we went back to these K-State things, those futurities, you guys have done them here. Darrell Busby's done them here. you have to go back and prorate feed with a Big Chief tablet and a blunt lead pencil, okay? So K-State did that for us for a while. Angus thought enough of it, they wanted to try it at our place. So Angus did it with us. Hereford did it with us. NCA did it with us. And so we started doing it with mathematical, equations longhand. It's all done with mathematical equations in the computer nowadays, okay? We can have a tremendous argument in here today about how valid that is on every animal. The bottom line is either you do this or you don't do it. We're not going to feed all these cattle with 5-gallon buckets like a 4-H steer and decide what each one of them gets. We're as close to that as being real. And that was never, if you don't believe this, you don't feed cattle with this, okay? It's just about as simple as that. And I'm not going to tell you it's perfect on every animal, but it is perfect inside the pen, I can tell you that. And it's as close a argument as we can make with it. Okay, there are 22, this is an individual animal closeout. There are 22 columns across the middle of that page. Can you even see my pointer in the back? Can you? No? If I turn it on, can you see it? Right here is a feed deficiency, okay? Daily gain, reason for the sort, days on feed. So right there is where this is split between feedlot performance per animal and carcass performance per animal, okay? So there is a split right here. Then putting them all together, you get a profitability. On the left-hand side is net return. Over here is market net return per head. So with that number, it's a theoretical number. We've tried to make all these cattle fit into this scenario with the same inputs and outputs, same prices, okay, because the market variability does change how this works, and that has nothing to do with your management, okay? So right here, this one, I think it says 16% or 18% above the average of your pen. That's your pen of cattle broken out individually, and there's the top animal of your pen, and they're sorted in order on that sheet from best to worst. And this one down at the bottom is 26% under the average of the pen. So you want to ask yourself, why are these cattle so bad at the bottom of this sheet? And why are they so good at the top of the sheet? And how can I make more of those at the top of the sheet? Knowing full well there'll always be a top half and a bottom half. You just want the top half and the bottom half both to keep getting better, making progress for the future. Then quarterly. Everyone in this room, let's say, fed cattle with us. Everyone in this room has an individual animal closeout. And let's say every one of you sold your cattle when? May? April or May, right? Okay, you all sold them in April or May. And we've got them listed here then by 100-pound increments, steers and heifers. And then so all the cattle closed out in March, April, and May, for example, or on this closeout, that you can compare your closeout against the feedlot average closeout. So now you have your own comparison. Now you're comparing it directly against what else we've got in the yard. Okay, sold on the same grid at the same time of the year as yours. For years, we encouraged everyone to look at the bottom 5 to 20% of their cows. That's where Mike Healy started. And then we flipped it and said, you know what? Buying bulls, sorting cows is fine, but buying bulls is incredibly more important than sorting off the bottom here. So we're saying that no matter who you are, you should retain ownership of at least a portion of your calves each year to document the improvement that you're making with us. If you don't have a baseline, you need to get one. And these are just, I'll go through these fairly fast. These are people that have fed with us for years that are telling us we did a good job. We went from making a little difference because of sorting the cows off the bottom of the herd to making 10 times the progress by working on the bull side of it. I was at the Kansas Livestock Association. Okay, got some more stuff to talk about. This is an old cattle fact slide. I've got 2 or 3 in this presentation. This is what got me started. I was introduced as being a past president of Cattlefax. That's a long time ago. But this stuff always intrigued me, that you have up here on a spring-born calf the options that you would have available to you as an owner of these calves. What are you going to do with your spring-born cattle? So most options you can think about are on this slide. One of them is direct to the feedlot right there. The most profitable avenue of growing a calf. And again, you guys in this state have a little different version of this than most people because of your diversity. But the best way to make money is wean him early, take him to the feedlot, and get him sold as fast as possible. Why, if you can see this at all, what's the key to profitability on this whole slide? I heard something. What's the key to profitability on this slide on a spring-born calf? The day you sell the cattle. That's pretty simple. This is a pretty simple explanation of this. So the high market, you're taking these March-born calves and selling them in March, April, and May, and maybe June. Because why? The market is historically the highest in April. March, April, and May, 86% of the time. There it is. So is it perfect? Is 86% perfect? It's not perfect, but I'd like to ask anyone in here, what do they know about anything they do that is more accurate than 86% of the time? Was this, I've asked this question once today, was this accurate this year, for example? The answer is no. When do you not want to sell fed cattle? August. Was that right this year? Incredibly not right this year. But this year is upside down and backwards. That's all I can tell you. It's not a bad year no matter what. It's pretty good all the way. Why is August a bad month to sell cattle? You have all the answers, man. I'm going to keep asking you. It's summertime. And when do a lot of calves hit the market, I wonder? When do a lot of spring-born calves hit the market? When do they not hit the market? How about March? How about April? They're not ready yet. You got a gun for this thing. So the yearlings are pretty well gone in March. The calves aren't quite ready in March. People in New York City want to grill in March if they can. It's the end of winter. All those things come together for lower supply, higher demand at the same time. When the calf feds finally get to market in July and August, doggone it, what happens? It goes straight down, except for this year. That's 86% of the time. Brett, another Cattlefax slide. Hasn't changed. That's just plain old seasonality. Lots of people sell calves in October. Worst month of the year historically to do it. And that's the calf-fed price. Steer price is high. Okay, on Cattlefax slide, what it showed was the calves made. It's an old slide now. It shows the calves made $86 per head every year forever on cattle sold in April. It shows that this number over here is $88 a head. Okay, that the market we're in right now, cattle normally make a little bit more money than they did last spring, but you own them theoretically 6 months longer. Not a very good trade-off. This is our running slide. We have one going for 3 years in a row all the time. It looks more dramatic than Cattlefax. But the market high is right there. This is for 11, 12, and 13. This year it's up here someplace. It's more like $300 a head. But this is a very unusual year. There, where the cattle were too expensive to feed the last 3 years, they make $120 a head on steers and about $90 a head on the heifers. And sell them right in there, March, April, and May. And then you don't sell them in July and August. So the point is, this is the bottom line to this presentation. If you're raising cows and calves and haven't ever fed them, why not? Is there ever a good time to feed them? It's every year, because I don't know when the 14% isn't valid. I don't know that. I just know 86% of the time I'm going to be okay with no risk management if I sell my calves in March, April, and May, and avoid the disaster in the summertime, because that takes the fun out of it. That takes it back to zero. And that's the way our feedlot population has looked for a long time. Fill up now, empty out in late spring, early summer. And the cattle make a lot of genetic improvement, a lot of management changes, and just continue to make more money. Does anyone want to argue with, those are facts, but does anyone want to talk about that? Evan, have I hit the point yet? Should I keep doing it? Does that make sense to everybody? It's just when the cattle are born everywhere. We feed cattle from about 30 different states, including Hawaii, and they are kind of all born at the same time, for crying out loud. Market timing is the best hedge, because I'm telling you, I have fought the futures. Lots of people in this room have fought the futures. And it's just easier for me to deal with the ranchers that are our customers. We like to partner with our ranchers on their cattle for obvious reasons. And it's just easiest to try to time the market than it is to try to outguess the market. Even CattleFax misses the market occasionally. So that lets you sleep at night and lets your banker believe it's okay. Now, this stuff, I do want to spend a little bit of time. I just came here from the KLA convention in Wichita. And James Herring was one of the speakers there. And this is important stuff. And he drilled on this a little bit in Wichita, and I just want to repeat it. The beef industry success stories will be about entrepreneurs who create practical, efficient, cost-relevant production systems that deliver consistent quality and quantity year after year and provide maximum protection to capital and risk. This guy feeds 300,000 cattle at a time. He is fully integrated, and he does hedge his cattle, source to finish. The cow-calf segment will need to respond to and align with upstream demands for more consistent and valuable genetics. How do you get that? The stocker segment will need to create stable and predictable relationships that will allow forward pricing and consistent year-round demand. Remember, he supplies a retail market 365 days a year, and somebody does, obviously. Feeders will need to align with the processing industry to create a predictable and sincere market that allows timely harvest at a predetermined consistent formula or value. Predetermined consistent formula value. Packers will need to successfully create predictable interface with the consumer through an efficient and consistent relationship with retail. All of us in the beef industry, beef trade, will have to focus on thoughtful, consistent delivery of predictable eating experience to our eventual customer.